right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and maybe even good night to some of you, depending on where you're located. We are so very, very thrilled to see so many people who've come together with us to really recognize what I think is going to be one of the most important events for the rare diseases community. My name is Durhan Wong Rieger, and I am chair of Rare Diseases International. And we are so really pleased to have so many supporters who have come together for what we are hoping will be the beginning of, well, we're actually really very much into the middle of the call for a UN high level resolution recognizing people living with rare diseases. And I think this is a hugely important event because it brings together people from all levels, certainly people living with rare diseases, the organizations that are helping to support and to increase the resources for people living with rare diseases, and certainly many, many of the important policymakers that are involved. So thank you very much for joining us in this really important event. As you can see, this is in fact a high-level political forum that is a side event to the high level for the United Nations, and is part of our call for a resolution to address the challenges of persons living with a rare disease as a human rights, sustainable development, and equity priority. And we're so very thrilled to have what is absolutely the show of support from so many people. So without much further ado, I'm going to actually begin the program. We've got three very important talks that are going to be taking place here, and really from people who have been, expressing from the political level their support and understanding for why this resolution is so important. I'm happy to introduce opening remarks from Her Majesty Queen Leticia of Spain, Her Excellency Michelle Bolsonaro, First Lady of Brazil, and Her Excellency Damares Alves, Minister for Women, Family and Human Rights of Brazil. Thank you very much for your support.
Saludo a todas las personas que están detrás de esta iniciativa para promover una resolución de Naciones Unidas que defina de forma conjunta cómo abordar los desafíos de las personas que padecen una enfermedad minoritaria. Gracias por permitirme participar en este impulso apoyado por tantos actores comprometidos en la tarea de mejorar la vida de las personas con patologías de baja prevalencia. Uno de esos actores es FEDER, la Federación Española de Enfermedades Raras, con quienes llevo ya una década compartiendo empeño en hacer lo posible desde todos los frentes para establecer alianzas entre administraciones, instituciones y asociaciones de pacientes encaminadas a acortar los tiempos de diagnóstico, a apoyar a las familias con información, asistencia y cuidados en todos los ámbitos, buscar el tratamiento adecuado si se consigue ese diagnóstico y propiciar la coordinación y financiación de la investigación científica, que es la esperanza de millones de personas. Ya saben todos ustedes que las enfermedades poco frecuentes afectan a más de 300 millones de personas en todo el mundo y que 2 de cada 3 debutan de forma precoz antes de los 2 años de vida. Hablamos de patologías crónicas muy complejas, progresivas e incapacitantes que convierten a esos niños en pacientes muy vulnerables y con una gran dependencia sanitaria y social. Por eso, España, junto con Brasil y Qatar, y con el impulso decidido de FEDER, EURORDIS y Rare Diseases International, presentarán en la próxima Asamblea General de Naciones Unidas una resolución que otorgue el marco común de acción fundamental y dé cobertura a los requerimientos de quienes sufren una enfermedad minoritaria o buscan el diagnóstico adecuado. Una resolución, además, que vinculará este compromiso de cooperación a los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. Y son varios los objetivos implicados, pero resulta evidente su conexión con la garantía de una vida sana y la promoción del bienestar en todas las edades. No seré exhaustiva, pero el fin de la pobreza, la igualdad de género, el trabajo decente y el crecimiento económico inclusivo, lo relativo a la investigación científica en el objetivo de industria e innovación, la reducción de desigualdades y, desde luego, la creación de asociaciones mundiales sólidas son objetivos que impactan de forma directa en el desafío que nuestras sociedades enfrentan con la realidad de las enfermedades no prevalentes. Si, como recuerdan, los pacientes pediátricos son muy numerosos, podrán imaginar las enormes dificultades de tantos niños y niñas para tener una educación de calidad. La pandemia de la COVID-19 ha revelado los problemas de millones de niños para acceder a este derecho fundamental. He hecho referencia a este objetivo de desarrollo sostenible por ser esencial en el camino de lograr una vida más digna para quienes conviven con este tipo de patologías, aunque, está claro, el resto de los ODS también señala por dónde debe ir la unión de esfuerzos que garantice la inclusión y pleno desarrollo de las personas con enfermedades raras. En España, la Estrategia Nacional de Enfermedades Raras trata de abordar de forma integral los retos que plantean las organizaciones de pacientes, con iniciativas y centros de referencia que incluyen la coordinación de los sistemas sociosanitarios en el máximo nivel de integración en todos los ámbitos. Se ha andado parte del camino, pero queda aún mucho por delante. Por ejemplo, determinar con detalle el impacto de la pandemia en las enfermedades poco frecuentes. Ya sospecharán que mi intención no ha sido detallar cada reto y que serán los afectados y sus representantes, que enseguida escucharemos, quienes expliquen los requerimientos de cómo proteger mejor sus derechos y de cómo darles confianza en el futuro y resultados concretos. España apoya plenamente este proyecto de resolución que, esperamos, genere la disposición, voluntad de acción y compromiso de todos para que las enfermedades minoritarias que afectan a tantos millones de personas impacten en sus vidas del modo menos doloroso e invalidante. Es nuestra responsabilidad. Muchas gracias.
Senhoras e senhores, nesta ocasião tão especial, à margem do Fórum Político de Alto Nível, o Brasil gostaria de sinalizar a importância da promoção de debates sobre doenças raras no âmbito das Nações Unidas e da sensibilização de atores relevantes sobre a matéria. Sabemos que as doenças raras, de modo geral, são condições complexas e com grande impacto na qualidade de vida das pessoas e famílias nas quais se manifestam. Tem sido praticamente consensual a busca por informação qualificada e por capacitação dos profissionais de saúde, de forma que possa ser ofertado cuidado adequado a quem vive com uma condição rara. Embora internacionalmente ainda faltam estudos populacionais amplos sobre as doenças raras, é necessário que medidas específicas sejam adotadas para se conhecer o impacto, a diversidade e as particularidades dessas condições, de forma que estados e governos consigam adotar mecanismos de proteção aos pacientes e familiares afetados.
O mundo vive atualmente uma emergência sanitária decorrente da pandemia de Covid-19. Como carecem de cuidados especiais e de apoio sistemático de profissionais de saúde, as pessoas com doenças raras se tornam mais vulneráveis, tanto por sua fragilidade orgânica e risco de infecção, quanto por terem dificuldades no acesso aos recursos e dispositivos médicos. Nosso país já acumula algumas experiências no cuidado dessas pessoas. Há leis, regulamentos sanitários, resoluções ministeriais e recomendações éticas em vigor. Como exemplo, nosso governo criou um comitê interministerial de doenças raras, importante colegiado, que tem como meta articular e alinhar ações do governo e adotar mecanismos e estratégias nos cuidados com os raros. Podemos destacar também a estruturação de uma rede nacional de doenças raras e um projeto de mapeamento de genomas raros. Ainda que haja avanços, consideramos necessário o alinhamento das experiências acumuladas internacionalmente e o fomento às boas práticas nas ações que se dirigem para essa população, focando principalmente em políticas nacionais que orientem os estados. Oportunidades como essa são fundamentais para trabalharmos juntos na garantia da qualidade de vida e assistência no mundo pós pós-Covid para as pessoas com doenças raras. É urgente darmos a devida voz e visibilidade a esse grupo humano vulnerável, garantindo-lhes a integralidade de seus direitos humanos. Muito obrigada.
Thank you very, very much. I would also like to recognize the member state Qatar, which is also one of the countries that is actually sponsoring the resolution at the United Nations for us. It is so important for us to have the political support, and also why, in fact, we have a campaign ongoing for all of you, for all of our members, to actually reach out to your own member states, to your governments, to ask them to make sure that they endorse the resolution, and to actually convey to them your personal understanding of why this is so important, regardless of whether you're a patient, whether you're a researcher, whether you're working in the clinical session, whatever you're doing, please, please do make aware. And I think, as you saw here very powerfully, the importance of this resolution, recognizing that rare diseases affects not just people clinically, medically, but it actually affects them socially, affects them in terms of their family, affects them in terms of every aspect of their life. And that's why this resolution and the recognition of rare diseases as part of the Sustainable Development Goals is so very, very important. And to help bring this home, we're so really delighted to bring to you words from our next speaker. This is actually, as we say, some of the most important things that we do here. I'd like to acknowledge who's here with us live today, Mr. Craig Mckeiber, who is the director of the New York office of the Office of the High Commission of Human Rights. Thank you very, very much for joining us this morning.
Well, thank you very much, Durhan. I'm very happy to be here. And to hear already those inspiring statements, and just to offer a few thoughts from my side as well. So, Excellencies and dear colleagues, I really want to thank very much the permanent missions of Spain and the permanent mission of Brazil, of course, the state of Qatar and of Spain, as well as all of the civil society partners, Rare Disease International, the NGO Committee for Rare Diseases, and EURORDIS, Rare Diseases Europe, for this invitation. Well, my central message today is one of encouragement. And I do so from a very deep conviction that your work to uphold the rights and dignity of people living with rare diseases is of central importance to the 2030 Agenda's commitment to leave no one behind. 300 to 400 million people are living with rare diseases, representing 4 to 5% of the world's population. This is roughly the same number of the people with diabetes worldwide, and 10 times the number of people living with HIV/AIDS. While there is no universal definition, rare diseases include well over 6,000 conditions, often of genetic origin. Few of these are yet preventable or curable. Most are chronic, and many result in early death. Despite their heterogeneity, rare diseases share a common challenge that is precisely linked to their rarity and low prevalence. A lack of knowledge and scarcity of expertise often lead to neglect and insufficient attention to the specific needs for care and services for those affected. Many people living with rare diseases also suffer from stigma and discrimination associated with their conditions. All of these challenges lead to serious unmet needs for the persons affected, their families, and their caregivers, and affect their enjoyment of a broad range of human rights on an equal basis with others, including the rights to health, to education, to work, to social security, as well as the right to actively participate and contribute to public life and to fully realize one's potential. Excellencies, the highest attainable standard of health is a fundamental human right in international human rights law. And this also reflects SDG 13, which aims to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. It is indispensable for the exercise of many other rights and necessary for living a life in dignity. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has made it even more pressing and urgent to work toward the full realization of this fundamental human right. As we saw in the Secretary General's progress report on the realization of the SDGs, the disruption caused by the pandemic has halted progress on SDG 3 and even reversed some gains. According to a recent study, substantial disruptions persist more than a year into the pandemic, with about 90% of countries and territories still reporting one or more disruptions to essential health services. The pandemic has exposed fundamental weaknesses in our health systems and has highlighted the pervasive inequalities and structural discrimination that have long inflicted wounds in every society across all realms of life. This is clearly manifested in the way people with rare diseases have been impacted by the pandemic. According to the survey conducted by Rare Disease Europe, patients with rare diseases had their access to essential healthcare and treatment disrupted due to overwhelmed public health systems. Limited knowledge and expertise about rare diseases created barriers for patients to receive the healthcare that they need in hospital settings. And there were no protocols in place to receive them. The measures taken to contain the spread of the virus, lockdowns and quarantines, have disrupted the delivery of essential care services for people with rare diseases, such as home-based support or access to daycare and rehabilitation centers. Furthermore, the pandemic has taken a heavy toll on the mental health of people with rare diseases, their families, and those who care for them. Even before the COVID-19 crisis, the socioeconomic determinants of health, such as inequality, discrimination, and poverty, were already major reasons why millions of people lacked access to good quality healthcare and services. Now, those already in vulnerable situations, including people with rare diseases, are among those suffering the most from the health and socioeconomic impacts of COVID-19. The pandemic has demonstrated the importance of strong and universal public health systems with quality care that is available, accessible, and affordable to all without discrimination and irrespective of anyone's ability to pay. Healthcare is not a commodity for sale to those who can afford it. It's not a privilege to be born into, but a fundamental human right to which all are entitled without discrimination. As we build forward better, achieving universal health coverage must be a fundamental priority. The case has never been stronger, nor the stakes higher, but it's encouraging to see that many states have taken steps to put in place measures to respond to the emergency and to address some of the immediate impacts of the pandemic. However, most of those measures taken so far remain short-term in nature and insufficient in themselves to address the inherent fragilities of our health and social protection systems. Dear colleagues, last year, the Secretary General called for a new social contract and a new global deal to combat inequality and to recover better from the pandemic. To transform this vision into reality, we need people and their rights to be at the center of recovery efforts and policies. This includes people with rare diseases who have been left behind and neglected in public health policies. Recovering better from the pandemic gives us an opportunity to identify the rights and well-being of people with rare diseases as a policy priority and as an integral part of universal health coverage. To this end, we need to invest more in gathering evidence, data, and research about rare diseases to increase our knowledge and awareness. We also need to ensure the meaningful and effective participation of people with rare diseases in policymaking and program design. And states must enable civil society actors and those affected themselves to play a substantive role in setting priorities and planning strategies. In other words, health policymakers and practitioners need to embrace a human rights-based approach with empowerment, equality and non-discrimination, participation, and public accountability as its key elements. Of course, all of these actions require strong political will. In some of the responses to the COVID-19 pandemic, we see that this is possible. And a comprehensive approach to the realization of the right to health of everyone, including people with rare diseases, will only serve to strengthen the resilience of our societies for future pandemics. This must be our goal as we build back better. I wish you every success in this endeavor, and I thank you.
And we thank you so very, very much. It is so heartwarming to hear the words that you have expressed. It really puts into really, I think, a strong relief the necessity in terms of the actions of the states in terms of embracing persons living with rare diseases on all scales, certainly from the medical, from the social, from the educational, from the employment, but definitely as a human rights issue. And you've put it so well for us. It really is heartwarming to know that our needs and our interests are being represented at such very high levels and that such important messages are being brought forth on our behalf. But I think as you will hear in the testimonies that come up, we're not just asking for a handout. We're not just asking for help. We are actually a very strong community, and the patients and the families that are living with rare diseases contribute greatly. I think as if you have already articulated well, it's opened up a pathway for people to be fully empowered, for people to exercise their rights, but also for people to contribute back. And that's what the whole purpose of those sustainable development goals are. How do we make sure that people are actually able to contribute? That Build Back Better means giving people the opportunity to actually contribute. So thank you very much. And I think as we will hear in the testimonies that are coming up from the families and the patients, really at that patient level, exactly what you're talking about, opening the pathway for these people to actually take that kind of a role. So I think we will turn directly to the testimonies, and thank you again so very much. And we continue to count on your support.
Hello, my name is Jaden, and this is my brother's story. He was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy when he was just 1 year old. But I don't know what that means. The doctors told my parents that he would have difficulty moving, eating, and breathing. They told my parents he would not live past 2 years old. But my parents never stopped fighting for him. My parents loved us, cared for us, and watched over us. Brandon made many friends, and I made many happy memories. I know it is hard for my family, but knowing that I am not alone means that there is hope. And while there is hope, we will keep supporting one another.
Got a second son to have a happy life.
Rare disease is not just a health concern, but it brings into focus a lot of the other things that are needed. Education, employment, stigmatization, inclusion, accessibility, all these other aspects that need to really whole of government, whole of society approach. In order to give the chance for a patient with SMA to be able to choose a life which they want, which is dignified.
He lived a decade longer than what he was expected medically. SMA does not define him. He is defined, however, by the society, people like you and me, on what he can and he can't achieve. Our family survived the first few critical years. Why family? Because SMA is just not about Brandon. It's about all of us in the family. When he was 6 years old, we visited 5 schools. With every visit, we were expecting a yes from the principal that he can join the school, but our wish never came true. With every visit, Brandon will ask me, "Mommy, why can't I go to school like brother and other kids? Is it because they don't like me? Am I not good enough?" Now, how will you answer his question? In the last 10 years, there have been many questions on why can't I get this, why can't I do this? In Brandon's life, we have to fight for everything, not just for him to survive his rare disease, but everything in life. Living with rare disease is already hard enough for the family, but living to be included for Brandon is even harder. Now I have a question for you. Can we do better and more for people living with rare disease?
name is Christine Mutena, and I'm a mom to 2 children with different rare conditions, namely MCM and ring 18 chromosome.
Hello, I'm Rosalie Nodero. I have a child with Joubert syndrome. As you might have guessed, having a rare disease affects you more than your healthcare. It affects your employment, education, and even your social standing and how you relate with the community. In this part of the world, having people with rare or children with rare diseases, it means that the society looks at you in a different way. They think that you're the cost. So there's that stigma and constantly being excluded from the society.
From a personal perspective, you find that most caregivers, primary caregivers, are mothers. And in the employment sector, you find that a lot of women are unemployed because they can't hold a job, either because they are taking their kids to hospital too often, or even if you're the adult living with a rare disease, you have to take time off to take care of yourself.
Having a UN resolution for rare diseases means that as a country we can adopt these policies that will make a meaningful change for people living with rare diseases.
We as Rare Disorders Kenya support the UN resolution for rare diseases.
Hello, my name is Sharifa and I'm from Kuwait. In 2015, my son was diagnosed with a rare disease called spinal muscular atrophy, or SMA for short. He was about a year and a half back then when I found out it was a terminal disorder and that he would most likely die of respiratory failure. But now, Nasa is almost 8 years old and is a bright, intelligent boy who is sociable and goes to mainstream school. He loves his friends and, like many other kids his age, loves playing Nintendo. And let me tell you that getting to where we are now was an intense struggle, and we continue to fight every day to keep him in good health, provide him with a good education, one in which he could feel and be equal to his peers, and to ensure that he gets all his basic needs and rights as an individual. I also chose this school because none of the other mainstream schools accepted him as a wheelchair user with health concerns related to his condition. It hurt me that he was rejected by several schools, and to me, I could only see my son thrive in an inclusive educational environment. Inclusivity from childhood will greatly impact future generations. It teaches children compassion and responsibility to care for their rare peers while enabling our rare children to become a productive part of society. Children like Nasa have great potential and should not be dismissed or marginalized. Inclusion is not just for education, but for all aspects of everyday life. I would like to draw particular attention to how the pandemic has affected us as a family. The isolation and fear that a lot have experienced the past year and a half is something we were already living in pre-pandemic. So imagine what this pandemic has done to us in terms of fear and isolation.
Hello, I'm Eva, and this here, if you can see it, is my son, Mckeiber. Mckeiber is turning 13 this year, and he's very proud of becoming a teenager. He has tuberous sclerosis complex, a rare genetic condition, and TSC is about as multisystemic as multisystemic can be. Mckeiber's condition prevents both my husband and I from working full-time. And during Corona, the combination of having him in the house 24/7 without any assistance or relief has had a staggering impact on our stress levels. I'm strongly connected to the global TSC community, and from that point of view, I know how immensely lucky we are to have a child with TSC and live in Belgium. The doctors we consult are connected to a TSC global network. We have affordable access to the right set of preventive checkups we get to address Mckeiber's symptoms before they grow to be life-threatening, and we actually found a school that has accepted the challenge of setting up an adapted program. It's really scary to realize that the majority of people living with TSC throughout the world do not have access to many of these things.
Everyone, I'm Juliana, and by the healthy looking shakes, no one could possibly imagine that I have a rare and debilitating condition called scleroderma. Invisible and rare illnesses like mine are a hard storm to navigate. I can summon this up by one horrible word that is what describes most of my feelings: abandonment. Most rare diseases are from the get-go. Well, most, not all. And the predominance of scleroderma are women at their prime, 30 to 50 years of age. But it can affect kids, the young, the older, male, female. It really doesn't discriminate, nor has boundaries. It is a global thing. I'm 47 now. I got the first amended diagnosis back in 2015. I saw my world, as I knew it, collapsing around me. No one is prepared for this type of storm, and I want to say my sincerest admiration for those who came before me and took action, persevered, and fought for public policies, access to treatment and medication, exams, specialists, to name a few. I can't imagine how it was before, because we still have so much to accomplish. All aspects of my life were changed. Some ceased to exist. The rapid set of symptoms does not accompany the amount of help offered. I lost everything except my will to live and to fight. I found myself alone, looking for help, looking for answers, looking for support groups, and so much more. It is really a crash course on survival. I lost my job, I lost my 20-year marriage, I lost all of my material belongings. I lost family members. The weakest links were the first to break apart. I always have been so productive as a member of society and in my family, within my profession, and in a couple of months, everything was gone. So we rare patients ask for your support on this ongoing battle for access and rights to better accommodating public policies that will grant these patients and families the help that they so much need. Thank you.
Wow, that was extremely powerful. I have to say that was the first time I've seen the video. So it was certainly a huge impact for me. And I think as everybody said, and what we heard there was really the echoes of what we heard earlier from the policymakers, certainly from Mr. Mckeiber as well. And that is rare diseases affects more than just your medical condition. It affects more than the patient, it affects the whole family. But we also saw there was a powerful community. You see people and you see families that are really waiting to take action and that want to be able to not just do for themselves, but to do for others. And as Juliana says, I thank all those who came before me that have allowed me to be where I am. And it says to all of us, what are we going to do to improve it for those that are now fighting for their rights to participate, but also those are to come. So we can really look forward to that future for everybody living with a rare disease. And now I would like to introduce a panel who's going to speak to you from various perspectives, from professional perspectives as well. What we like to say is that there will be a Q&A session following the panel discussion, but as the panel is speaking, if indeed you have questions that come to mind that you would like to direct to a specific panelist, we won't have an opportunity to have you do them live, but put them into the Q&A. And even if we don't get to all of the questions during the Q&A, be aware that we will collect them. We will send them to actually individuals if you have specifics, and we will do our very best to address it, because it is so very important that we are all participating in this. I want to acknowledge again, we have well over 250 people have joined us, recognizing the importance of this event and really wanting to make sure that we give everybody a chance to participate. So I'm really excited to have this multi-stakeholder panel. And many of these people are people that I know and have such great admiration for, and have been such a friend of the rare disease community. I'll introduce them all at once, and then we'll ask them to speak. And then, as I say, we'll follow this with a Q&A. First speaker is Reverend Dr. Liberato C. Bautista, the president of Congo, the Conference of NGOs and Consultative Relationships with the United Nations, and has been such an important friend from us from the very beginning. We're just so delighted to have him here to speak to us at this important juncture. Ms. Maria Montefusco, who is the chairperson of Rare Diseases Sweden, and is important also as a member of the board of EURORDIS. Thank you so much. A great colleague for me is Dr. Lucia Monaco, who's chair of the International Rare Diseases Research Consortium and continues to move forward with us in terms of not just research, but in so many aspects. And Dr. Gareth Bainham, director of Western Australia's Undiagnosed Disease Program, and has done such, I will say, groundbreaking work in what they're doing for rare diseases. You see Perth as this hub of amazing, amazing font of innovation for rare diseases. And always Gareth is available to help spread the word. So I'm going to turn it over to the panel. Do put your questions into the Q&A if you have them, and we will have a Q&A session that follows.
Thank you very much, Dr. Derhain. Excellencies, delegates of United Nations member states, distinguished UN officials, fellow panelists, and NGO colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good evening, good day, wherever you are joining us. At the outset, I would like to state some assertions central to both our advocacies for and with persons living with a rare disease, and for all others who struggle to make real the SDG rallying cry, leave no one behind. Still from the get-go, to have persons living with a rare disease articulate for themselves their innate joys, but also their concerns about exclusion and marginalization from an operative principle popular to civil society, nothing about us without us. Recognizing the innate human dignity of persons living with a rare disease and guaranteeing their human rights must be at the core of our collective concern. Our larger, if holistic conception of both human dignity and human rights assumes that the experience of security, peace, sustainability, and indeed of human rights fulfills and enhances humanity's well-being. That larger conception, in fact, also assumes that well-being to be not only for humans, but for the planet. It also assumes, I believe, that freedoms are enlarged when rights are secured, and rights are secured when everyone's dignity defines and animates the relationships, the societies and communities, large and small, that we institute for the common good. And what should be good for all should be good for persons living with a rare disease. After all, we say, all human rights for all. Therein lies the urgency of what this event is advocating for, a UN resolution that not only would create the awareness about persons living with a rare disease, but the equal urgency to create policies for the protection of this vulnerable population. This concern for greater awareness and protection is not exclusive to people living with a rare disease. It is a shared concern for all persons experiencing stigmatization, discrimination, vulnerability, marginalization, and therefore exclusion in enjoying the fullness of life and the flourishing in life that comes from the fundamental recognition of the obligations we owe to each other in society in providing for the wherewithal to flourish that life in dignity and with freedoms. This, to me, must be at the core of that fundamental ethic that we have emblazoned in Agenda 2030, leave no one behind. That ethic involves a larger vision of society that is kind and compassionate, humble but resolute in its advocacies, but also secure and just. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, persons living with a rare disease must be participants in the flourishing of this ethic because therein lies their fundamental dignity as well, and their right to participate in the civil, political, social, economic, and cultural processes that address the challenges they face in life and in society. But may I add a corollary ethic to low one behind, which is the recognition of the right of people living with rare disease to represent themselves as principals and not via proxies. We owe the disability communities the expression of this other ethic, nothing about us without us. For me, central to the corollary ethic are two principles, that of direct representation by persons living with a rare disease of their own concerns, and that of accompaniment, that rare and humbling occasion when we are trusted by marginalized and excluded communities to accompany and advocate alongside them in reducing, if not eliminating, their disproportionate level of vulnerabilities and stigma, discrimination, and lack of opportunities for inclusion that they experience in their communities of meaning and in larger society. Accompaniment and advocacy, it's what we are about at the Conference of NGOs, Congo. It is what we do as NGOs and civil society representatives, not the least at UN forums, including the high-level political forum in which this event is held. Harnessing the collective voice of civil society and bringing that voice to bear upon multilateral processes so that such processes reflect and reaffirm the already agreed fundamental human rights and freedoms of peoples and their communities, but also to be open and willing to negotiate for the expansion of those rights that are aching to be protected. The human rights of people living with a rare disease is but one of them. It is therefore fitting to pay tribute to the organizers and benefactors of this side event, to this year's HLPF, including the NGO Committee for Rare Diseases, EURORDIS, Rare Diseases International, and AGRESCA, a full Congo member serving in the Congo board. By holding this event, this committee and its collaborators set an example for collaboration among NGOs and civil society with the UN system and member states of the UN. From my perspective as president of the Conference of NGOs, this event is proof of the expertise and competency that NGOs and their committees bring to the UN. It is proof of what I call in my presidency the power of co. Co being a derivative of our name, Congo. We are co-NGOs working consultatively with the UN, working collaboratively with other NGOs, and working cooperatively with the wider society. The power of co, the power of collective voice and agency is ever more needed today, especially as we endeavor to recover from the pillage and plunder of COVID-19. The devastations wrought by this health pandemic upon peoples and communities and their livelihoods and the economy affected all of us. But let us not forget, disabilities and a rare disease are added burdens in these times of pandemic, and we must give these burdens the required attention. It makes me proud because this event is a prime example of how our NGO committees which at Congo we call substantive committees, engage substantively the wide expanse of the UN system and speak directly to any given agenda. And in this instance, this committee is weighing in on the agenda of HLPF by showcasing how addressing the challenges of persons living with a rare disease, recognizing their rights, needs, and priorities, as well as promoting their active participation and harnessing the opportunities for their inclusion in society is so critical and essential to the realization of Agenda 2030 and to the sustainable recovery from COVID-19 pandemic. This collaboration by the rare disease civil society community with the support of a number of UN member states, including Spain, Brazil, and the state of Qatar, is concretely proposing to discuss the possibilities of adopting a UN General Assembly resolution that can act as a catalyst and provide a constructive and consensual intergovernmental vision on the issues confronted by persons living with a rare disease. Ladies and gentlemen, this collaboration is exactly this: accompaniment and advocacy alongside persons living with a rare disease. The NGO Committee for Rare Diseases, under the able leadership of Mr. Anders Olsen of Agrenska, was constituted in 2015 and inaugurated in 2016 precisely to bring to central focus with greater political recognition of the challenges of persons living with a rare disease at the global level by promoting rare diseases as a priority in global health, in research, and in social and medical care, within but not exclusively the purview of the Agenda 2030. The collaboration and partnership made possible through the work of this NGO committee ensures that the UN fulfills its role as a key enabler for better lives for persons living with a rare disease, and that no one is left behind indeed in the path towards sustainable development. I cannot agree more with this committee. And that brings me back to why an ethic of kindness, justice, and humility is crucial in fulfilling not only the Agenda 2030 rallying cry of leaving no one behind, but also in fulfilling the civil society advocacy call of nothing about us without us. In conclusion, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, justice, kindness, and humility are ethical imperatives that must serve as criteria in addressing the concerns, indeed our accompaniment and advocacy with persons living with a rare disease. A justice criterion addresses, among other matters, power and empowerment, because at their core is a question of power inequalities. The empowerment of people living with a rare disease is therefore a question of allocating power to this vulnerable and marginalized community so that they have the wherewithal to speak for themselves and their concerns. Kindness and a kind society ensure and provide safety nets and establish rights for vulnerable and marginalized peoples, again, including people living with a rare disease. To paraphrase the public intellectual Cornel West, kindness is what justice looks like in the public square. It is what humanizes our relations, especially in an alienating atmosphere today of so much discrimination and exclusion of every kind in society. I submit to you that vaccine equity, indeed health equity, should be part of our understanding of not just kindness, but of justice, indeed health justice. And lastly, humility reminds us of life's finitude, not only of life's physical environment, but of our capacities and the organizations and communities that we organize and form. Humility is a posture, knowing that our understanding of rare diseases are yet puny, but evolving, even as our resolve to know them and find cures are equally urgent. This is an ample evidence both for NGOs and the UN that they must be crucial partners in the realization of such work. It is what makes multilateralism work. And indeed, multilateralism works. And it works when the widest expanse of the peoples of the world are engaged in values. To paraphrase the much loved, or at least NGO much loved former Secretary General Kofi Annan, human rights truly embody the principles by which we create the sacred home for human dignity. The ethic of human rights and human dignity are the same ethic of kindness, humility, and justice. Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to join the rare disease community in this very important enterprise so that the protection that they need and the dignity that innate to these people are recognized and protected. Thank you for your kind attention.
Maria Montefusco, I invite you to speak.
Dr. Durkheim, I'm done. I'm through.
Yes, no, I was inviting Maria to speak. Thank you very much.
Yes, Duran, thank you so much. And thank you all of the organizers for inviting me. It's a true pleasure and a huge honor. Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, friends of the rare disease community, thank you for showing your interest in how to address the many unmet needs among and the challenges and barriers for inclusion of the 30 or 300 million people living with the rare disease in the world. Every rare disease and condition is quite different from the other. It's the rarity that unites us in the movement. The rarity and the complexity of the conditions make us face similar challenges, but they are really different. As expressed several times in the video, the rare diseases are much more than a health concern and demand a whole government, a whole society, the whole of UN, if you will, and the whole world to cooperate. The Agenda 2030 and the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goal could contribute to the inclusion of this in multiple ways vulnerable population. And logically, the efficient inclusion of persons living with a rare disease and our families would at the same time contribute to the global implementation of Agenda 2030 in a way that no one is left behind. To point out the specifics and show how to support these achievements, we from the NGOs representing people with rare diseases are certain that this resolution that we're talking about today, adopted by all the member states of the UN, would strengthen our possibilities of meeting the needs and develop sustainable solutions for inclusion. A resolution would help us to connect the wide range of sectors, actors, networks, and individuals that are needed to progress. And we could get the right policies in place. And also in the rare disease field, we know that no country or no region is strong enough and alone. In a sustainable world, no one is left behind anywhere. But our studies and the many testimonies from all over the world show that when it comes to persons living with rare disease and the families, we have not reached far enough. But together, we have the knowledge, we have the networks, we have the ambitions, and we have the power to tear down the barriers for inclusion. And why can we only do this together? Well, it's about the rarity and the complexity. The rarity of the conditions demand international cooperation. Even if societies and countries differ, people's needs and rights to health, well-being, and inclusion are the same. And the diseases, as we know them, do not discriminate. They occur any and everywhere. A fundamental challenge in the rare disease field is that there is always too little and too scattered knowledge and resources. When we gather and share the little knowledge and the small resources each country, each region can provide for the rare, we grow stronger in awareness and in capacity to understand and to meet the needs. When we raise awareness together, the rare becomes something common and something known, something visible, and we can meet the needs. A rare disease is often severely disabling, affecting the body and the mind in a variety of ways and has an impact on the whole life of a person and her close ones. What we know about the living conditions and the barriers for inclusion can easily be connected to the goals and the indicators of Agenda 2030. I will mention just a few examples. About SDG 10 on the inequality. Today, people with rare diseases and their families do not enjoy their lives on equal grounds with others. On the opposite, our studies show that girls, boys, women, and men living with rare diseases face discrimination, exclusions, and lots of barriers that are unacceptable. We have clear testimonies that the rarity and the complex needs cause confusion, and they cause uncertainty, and in worst cases, neglect, which create barriers in access to healthcare, to education, to working life, and leaves a person abandoned, as we have heard today. The daily lives are burdened by discrimination and managing stigmatization. Visualizing these inequalities, raising awareness, and putting in place clear political strategies aiming for inclusion can change this. I will mention SDG 1 on poverty. Persons with rare diseases and complex needs are burdened economically by costs generated directly by the health condition. This alone can be devastating for an already small income, but also costs due to inaccessible and expensive school and education, the lack of social support so that parents can work and siblings can work and have an income. Not addressing these needs generate more poverty. On SDG 4, education, I will mention that schools and higher educational environments are still not accessible nor inclusive to students with rare health conditions and disabilities. The complex combination of functional impairments demands special education or other kinds of adaptations that many school systems do not provide. Flexibility and the competence among school staff is also important. Therefore, inclusive, accessible, and affordable education for all ages is critical for students with rare diseases to be empowered and to thrive in life. We often talk about decent work and the importance of SDG 8. Today, a rare disease can affect the ability to work for the person and for the family members. But if working life is inclusive, there is a place and a space for everyone to contribute. In a sustainable society, every person is important. Every contribution matters. Persons living with a rare disease were excluded before the pandemic. In a post-COVID era, we know that we need to build back a better society. No society can afford that there are people that can work that do not. Discrimination on the labor market needs to stop. Persons with the rare diseases and parents and siblings should be seen for our potential and to be supported and to be active in working life and be a part of the sustainable future for ourselves and the society as a whole. I will also mention SDG 5 on gender equality. A sustainable future is not possible if girls and women are excluded in any way. Girls and women living with the rare disease are exposed to discriminating practices that makes us even more vulnerable than boys and men. One example is that mothers are often the primary caregiver and is therefore more economically and socially dependent to others. Girls and women are excluded in school, working life, and healthcare to a higher degree than boys and men. This is not sustainable. So we have Agenda 2030. Why do we also need a UN resolution? It's the rarity and the complexity of the needs of 300 million people living with a rare health condition, diagnosed or not. We need special attention and action. This is why we in the rare disease movement are here today to reach out to all the UN member states to join forces and to contribute to a more sustainable future for everyone, everywhere who lives with a rare disease. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria, and also really thank you for being able to so articulately help us understand the importance of the UN resolution and the SDGs with regard to specific aspects of rare disease life. So thank you. Now we're going to turn to Lucia Monaco, who is the chair of IRDIC, the International Research Consortium on Rare Diseases. Lucia?
Thank you very much, Durhaina. Good morning, good afternoon, evening, and night to everybody. Your Excellencies, distinguished participants and audience, dear friends and colleagues, I am honored and awed at presenting the experience of the International Rare Diseases Research Consortium, IRDIRC, in the light of the Agenda 2030 and in the prospect of a United Nations resolution on the challenges of persons living with a rare disease. The International Rare Diseases Research Consortium was created 10 years ago with the aim of tackling these challenges with the tools of research. Research offers indeed formidable weapons to respond to the needs of persons living with rare diseases, but its potential needs to be exploited with intelligence and wisdom in order to bring solutions to all in need. IRDIRC was created to respond to this aspiration. The consortium brings together all relevant stakeholders in rare diseases research from across the globe, including research funding organizations and companies committed to investing in research and development for rare diseases, and importantly, umbrella patient advocacy organizations as key actors driving priorities in IRDIRC, as well as international experts in all scientific domains and clinical specialties relevant to rare diseases. Today, IRDIRC accounts 62 member organizations from 22 countries from all continents and is supported by 3 scientific committees and relies on teams of international experts working on specific tasks identified and prioritized by the Consortium Assembly in order to produce specific tools and recommendations for the community. IRDIRC's 3 goals for year 2027 aim at developing and making available concrete solutions in terms of diagnosis and treatment, and to develop methods to measure the impact of such solutions on the lives of persons living with rare diseases, under an overarching vision of responding to the urgency and overcoming the hurdles of patients and of people living with rare diseases in having access to such solutions. I would like to refer to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development by highlighting specifically 2 goals that are very relevant and specific to the IRDIRC activities. The first one is SDG 17, Partnerships for Goals, having among its targets the enhancement of international cooperation on and access to science, technology, and innovation, and the enhancement of knowledge sharing, as well as of encouraging and promoting effective public, private, and civil society partnerships. These concepts are at the basis of IRDIRC activities. Our work is founded indeed on the collaboration among public bodies, such as national funding agencies, private organizations such as research foundations, and importantly, biotech and pharmaceutical companies, and the civil society represented by patient advocacy organizations from different geographical areas. Altogether, these actors represent the diversity and complexity of the rare disease landscape and share needs and contribute a composite set of expertise that allows to identify gaps, priorities, and inequalities, and to address them through dedicated task forces, leveraging collective knowledge and intelligence contributed by the experts recruited from the international arena. Task forces address the specificities, complexity, and hurdles for rare diseases in developing diagnoses, designing clinical studies, traveling through the regulatory requirements, data standardization and sharing, just to name a few. The second sustainable development goal I would like to highlight is SDG 9, Industries, Innovation, and Infrastructure. This goal is central to the IRDIRC core mission, especially in relation to the target of enhancing scientific research and upgrading the technological capabilities of industrial sectors, as well as to the target of developing quality, reliable, sustainable, and resilient infrastructures to support economic development and human well-being, with a focus on affordable and equitable access for all. In particular, innovation is key to developing solutions such as diagnostic tools and therapies to the challenges of persons living with a rare disease, and is a driver for the whole rare diseases research and development path. Also, infrastructures are essential for the sharing of and access to knowledge and expertise, and for the development and production of diagnosis and treatments. Continued and increasing investment in research and innovation is, of course, fundamental for rare disease, but it is also extremely, if not even more important, that whatever resources are dedicated to rare diseases, efforts are directed to addressing gaps and needs in a cooperative manner as much as possible, in order to avoid duplication of efforts and to build the synergies. This is of paramount relevance in consideration of the rarity, diversity, and complexity of rare diseases, and of the fragmentation of knowledge and resources that still exists in the field of rare diseases. All of IRDIRC activities are built on the premise of fostering collaboration, and have produced and are continuously producing guidelines, recommendations, and policies and tools based on evidence collected with the contribution of experts and the stakeholders to be shared across the whole rare diseases community worldwide. A UN resolution on the challenges of persons living with a rare disease would provide a formidable scenario for IRDIRC activities and outputs to be disseminated, acknowledged, and adopted at international, national, and local levels, and would enhance collaboration and fuel further energy into our efforts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lucia, and thank you really for being able to bring in the value of the UN resolution and the SDGs. We know that IRDIRC is already working in collaboration in bringing together so many sectors and certainly around the globe, but this really helps to, I think, put a really important point on it. So thank you again. And now Now we'll ask Gareth Abane to speak. Gareth is certainly one of the leaders in the rare disease community, even though he sits at the very tip of the world to some degree. So we see a lot of policies and we see a lot of good practices being driven out of his small little pocket there, and has a huge impact on all of us. And we're always so very delighted that Gareth is willing to accommodate to the timeline, to the time zones of the rest of the world to be available to us for these kinds of very important events. Gareth, I call on you.
Thank you. Can you hear me? I'm just checking. I've had a few technical issues, so can you hear me, Dane?
We're doing okay at the moment. Don't wiggle around.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for thank you for this incredible honor, Your Excellencies, delegates, ladies, gentlemen, friends, colleagues. I so wish we could be there in person together, but I'm also so grateful for the technology that we have to enable this to us to go forth. I want you to imagine. I want you to imagine a global crisis that cross-cuts every sector of life: education, health, employment, insurance, society as a whole. I want you to imagine a global event characterized by isolation, unknowing, uncertainty, inequity, poverty. I want you to imagine the need for intergovernmental cooperation across all agencies, across all sectors, across the globe. I want you to imagine the need to develop new ways to connect people, new therapies, new vaccines, new treatments, new policies. Now, for hundreds of millions of people, for hundreds of years, this is not needed to be imagined at all. It has been a lived experience, the lived experience of people with rare diseases. We now have a similar set of experience that is touching us globally. through COVID. Through COVID now, many of us are experiencing what it's like to live with a rare disease as an individual, as a family, as a community, as a global community. And as we move forth now through and after COVID, we have an opportunity to take some of those solutions that we've developed through COVID and apply these to the unmet needs that help us advance towards towards the agenda. The commonalities, the need for global connection, the need for cross-sectoral connection. I also want to imagine inequities at other levels, inequities within inequities within inequities, poverty within poverty. I want you to think, for instance, about the undiagnosed population. Those so many people with complex, chronic, undiagnosed conditions, most of which are rare diseases. I want you to think about the burden and the uncertainty. I want you to think about the presenteeism, the absenteeism, the impact on family and carers. I want you to think about the economic impacts, the mental health impacts. I want you to think about populations in low and middle income countries. I want you to think particularly about Indigenous populations that on average are poorer, more likely to live in remote areas and to suffer inequities of all types. Now I want you to imagine the combination of having a rare disease, living in a remote region, and being Indigenous. A triple whammy, if you like. People that are suffering for a depth of inequity from a combination of isolating events. It is this depth of inequity, it is this global inequity that the UN resolution would have such a special value and power to drive for our the most vulnerable amongst us, so we truly leave no one behind. There are also enormous opportunities. We see relevance to SDGs 8 and 9 for decent work and economic growth, for industry, innovation and infrastructure. There are opportunities in serving these unmet needs that deliver new solutions that truly help all of us across the globe. We've seen this recurrently through serving the needs, for instance, of the Indigenous communities with rare diseases and building capacity therein, new approaches, new educational opportunities, new social opportunities, new innovations, new solutions that not only help to address their unmet needs, but then are generalizable to non-Indigenous people and people in metropolitan areas. So we don't have to imagine a set of experiences, but we do have to imagine the way forward as we come together to serve people's needs. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so very much, Gareth, for bringing all of this together in such a powerful statement. And I think Gareth and everyone has really reinforced why this UN resolution is so very important, but also really what it is that rare diseases will contribute to the overall mantra that Dr. Bautista is talking about, and leave no one behind. We've heard from, their excellencies, we've heard from Her Majesty, why this is very important from their perspectives as leaders in terms of the various countries, member states, but we've also heard it from the people themselves and now also from our other stakeholders. This is such a hugely important moment, and we do know, and as Gareth has indicated, we can't think of any other community that's made up of 6,000 or 7,000 different diseases, that's made up of what Juliana calls people that are so truly isolated and yet have been able to come together in this very powerful movement. I mean, if you think about, what rare diseases means, it really is a very diverse community that's been able to come together with really great commonalities and work on behalf of everybody in that diversity. I love what Gareth said at the very beginning. there's a double whammy on top of a double whammy on top of a double whammy. But as you've heard from the families and the patients themselves, how people have been able to work through that. We are seriously out of time because of the really powerful comments that were really made. I cannot really challenge that. We do have a number of questions here, and I'm wondering if I can just sort of give a question maybe back to each one of the panelists based on what we've heard. And I really love what Lisa has in here. Maybe I'll put that challenge to you in addition to that overall global, challenge of what would a global resolution mean to you. You've been given that resolution before, and I think Clara or Flaminia, if you want to put it up there again, encourage people to actually write their comments into the Q&A or into the chat line. Your responses to it, people have been doing that already. It's a very powerful, I think, series of comments that have been made. We will collect all of them. They will help us in terms of being able to put together our final submissions. But maybe I'll ask each one of you again, how can we leverage a UN resolution? So it's one thing to have a UN resolution, and sometimes we hear people with a bit of a, John just saying, oh, well, it's just a resolution. But really, how can we leverage it? What would it mean? Especially as I hear what Lisa's saying, working so hard, trying to get the countries to respond, trying to get the different kinds of social entities to respond, educational, employment agencies to respond. What could we leverage with a UN resolution? How would that help? And maybe I'll go back, I'll start with go back to Maria, because I think you spoke to a lot of it, but from your role in terms of EURORDIS as well, how would this help in addition to what the European resolutions have already done?
Thank you so much for the possibility to speak again. I represent also a country, Sweden, that does not have a national strategy, a national policy on rare diseases, and at Rare Diseases Sweden, the umbrella organization, we have been campaigning for this for a very long time. And in our struggle, the European work has been extremely helpful. And it's clear that the more we cooperate on a regional level, the more we understand we need to cooperate even more on the international level. So having a UN resolution would echo the urgency of the field, the needs of people living with these conditions, and it would have all the UN member states behind it. So the power in that, I believe, could strengthen the struggle on a regional, but also national and the local level. So I think having that strength from the UN system, pointing out what are the challenges and how can we meet them together, would be extremely helpful for everyone working for a better life, for everyone working for a better life for persons living with a rare disease.
Thank you very much. I did not realize that Sweden did not yet have a rare disease strategy. So
no, sorry about that.
Yeah. Well, despite the best advocacy efforts, maybe I'll go back to Lucia. I know that you spoke about the different SDGs. What about research in countries that are not yet active in research? Or what about countries that are not yet implementing, supporting some of the research initiatives that have taken place? Could a UN resolution help there?
I think the UN resolution would really help disseminate the progress that is made in countries that are able to do research, not only in terms of concrete solutions, in terms of providing access to these solutions, but also in terms of recognizing the importance of policies that are developed, recommendations that are proposed. So giving to such recommendation indications that are developed by countries that are able to do so today, to be taken up, to be recognized as authoritative recommendation that can be built upon. So countries that are at a stage where research is getting ready, is not ready yet, can build upon the knowledge and the recommendation and the tools that are developed elsewhere in a spirit of collaboration. And that, of course, requires politics behind that. And I believe that the UN resolution would really be the right solution to promote this kind of collaboration. Another area and another dimension that is so relevant for rare diseases is that of data sharing. And data sharing has so many facets that need to be addressed, including, importantly, all the ethical aspects connected to the privacy of the persons, but connected also to the development of standardized solutions and platforms, and again, building concrete solutions that allow to leverage what is already out there and making it available to everybody. That would be really a great effort that the UN's resolution would definitely help take place.
Thank you very much, Lucia. It also worked. I don't want to not give due time to our final speaker, but that was such an important comment because it also says to us who are working in this international community, including RDI, that we need to take seriously our responsibility to all of the people in all of the countries, regardless of their level of development and regardless of how well they are actually participating at the moment. We have a global responsibility, and hopefully a UN resolution will also remind us and also help us expand what we're doing in that way. So it gives me great pleasure, though, to introduce our final speaker, and Anders Olsen, who is obviously so well known to the rare disease community. And I say this, and I say, Anders has heard me say it in other contexts. Without Anders, I think sincerely, none of us would be here today at this UN event. Anders has really been the champion for rare diseases at the United Nations level, has opened the doors in terms of his personal work to having as a member of Congo, recognizing the value of those kinds of partnerships, and personally traveling, I think globe-trotting, to really get the right people on board. And it's no small feat that Anders has. He's also one of the most slick talking persons you want. So when Anders comes to you, regardless of whether or not you're sitting as a royal person or whether you're sitting as a person that he needs your support for, when Anders opens up and asks, you respond. So Anders, I'm going to leave it to you to close this for us.
Thank you, dear. Thank you. And do you hear me well? Yeah, I hope. Excellencies, dear friends all around the world, I will try to summarize this very important day today. And today we truly look at our community as a global community. Rare diseases have, of course, always existed throughout the world and in every country, but we haven't always been connected into one common goal like today. This experience on how it is worldwide has shown us urgent need to form a common ground for the work you all heard about today. As we heard earlier from Her Majesty Queen Letizia, said that rare disease affects everything in your life and affects more than 300 million people worldwide. Together, Brazil, Qatar, and Spain will present a resolution to the General Assembly of the United Nations in New York later this year. I couldn't be more happier. Through the Sustainable Development Goals that Queen Letizia mentioned, we can address the holistic needs that the person with a rare disease has to face. It shows that SDG 3 on health is not the only important SDG for our community. Also SDGs 1, 3, 4, 5, 8, and 10 are important for us. And this is well described in the concept note you all have received today. Please read it again. And we also learned that in a very pedagogic way through the video, Dear UN. Listening to the person who sent the testimonies for the video, Dear UN, really touched my heart today. Hearing the same voice from different parts of the world shows us that we truly are in it together. Mr. Mckeiber gave us a strong view on the important role and work that the office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights can play. And it feels so fantastic to hear him talking our language, which really touched my heart and make me love UN even more. Listening to our panel today made me even stronger and hopeful in my belief that we will have a resolution adopted at United Nations General Assembly this year. This is such an important step for our community. Can we do better and more for persons living with a rare disease? That is a question that we heard from Brandon's mother. And we hear the same question in every country in the world. The answer is easy and concrete. Yes, you can collectively send a strong message to our community by voting in favor of a UN resolution on addressing the challenges of persons living with a rare disease and their families around the world. Let me come back to the true impact of having a rare disease. First Lady Mrs. Bolsonaro said about complexity. This influences all areas of your life, your health surely, and much more. Your social life, your children's condition to perform well in school, your financial situation, and not least your adult working life. The reason we turn to the UN in New York is obviously after listening to what have been said today. Everyone from Queen Letizia to Brandon's mother urges us to do the same thing. Adopt a UN resolution that would address all the areas that are important for our community, beyond only health. Also, on behalf of the NGO Committee for Rare Diseases, I would like to thank all persons involved in making this event possible today. Thank you to the Permanent Mission of Spain, Brazil, and Qatar. Thank you, Duran and Rare Disease International. Thank you, EURORDIS, and thank you all who have been listening to the event today. Let me just add how very happy I am to see so many UN agencies, permanent missions, and other partners today to support our ambition. I really look forward to working with you all toward this global objective, and I hope that when we meet in Dubai, the World Expo in February next year, 2022, we can celebrate the resolution and identify avenues to travel towards its implementation. But for now, let us all together remember the question of Brandon's mother and respond by saying yes to a UN resolution. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Anders. And again, thank you for your tremendous leadership through all of this. I also note that Jan Lecom has joined us, and thanks to, between the two of you, have really, really continued to blaze the way for us. So really huge kudos to all, and huge thanks also to the staff at RDI for actually putting on this wonderful, wonderful Flaminia, Makia, Clara, Averas, Joani, Ida. I thank you so much. This has been a real tour de force from all of you. Yes, the video will be available. Yes, it can be sent to you as a link. Yes, that powerful, powerful set of testimonials from the families will be available. Yes, the comments from their excellencies and Her Majesty will be available. All of this will be available. But more importantly, I think it's clear would say you need to do your part. We need to have you take advantage of the toolkit that the RDI has put together, look at the concept note, use the tools to reach out to your members of the UN and really call upon them to support this resolution. It really is up to you and to the members to actually make this happen. We can do this here, but we need you to do your part. And again, thank you for all the comments that people put in here. This will help us as well in terms of making a powerful statement. I think what we know is that the rare disease community is, in fact, a very strong community. And as we've heard, Brandon's mom and from the family and the people on up, we're all trying our best to do our part. And a UN resolution calling on for policies that would support that will actually open the pathway for us to be able to do more, not just for us, but for all those who are living with a rare disease, all those who are to come. So huge thanks to everybody for participating. It was a tremendous audience. We really, really look forward to, having this resolution passed at the United Nations this fall, and really looking forward to as Anders says, his personal invitation for all of us to meet in Dubai next February. If you need support for getting there, just write to Anders. He has a tremendous checkbook. He will make sure that we get there. So we will make sure that we're able to meet in person as soon as possible. Thank you again so very, very much to everyone for your support. Thank you.